working on evaluating algebraic expressions. So evaluating algebraic expressions is what we'll focus on today. So today you will evaluate algebraic expressions using the order of operations. Now you'll notice here that we're seeing some words that we saw in the previous lesson. So evaluate, we already know, that's find the value of. We've already seen the word expression, that means that it's not going to have an equal sign in it. And then order of operations, we already know, that is GEMDOS, grouping symbols, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract. The only new word here today for us is algebraic. So let's talk about that for just a minute. The big thing that makes algebra different from just regular math is variables. So an algebraic expression is an expression that contains one or more variables. So in the last lesson, we did numerical expressions where it was just numbers and operations. And now algebraic expressions, we're going to add variables into the mix. And variable is a concept you're familiar with. You know that a variable is a letter that stands for an unknown number. So a letter in a problem that stands for an unknown number. And we spend a good deal of our time in algebra trying to figure out what number those variables stand for. All right, so let's get into some problems here. So here's the kind of problem we're going to be looking at. Evaluate, find the value of a plus b if you know that a is equal to 5 and b is equal to 8. So this is an algebraic expression because it contains variables. All right, so we're going to evaluate this if we know that a is 5 and b is 8. So I'm going to come over here, and where this a is, I'm going to sub in that number 5. And where this b is, I'm going to sub in the number 8. So when I do that, my problem becomes 5 plus 8. Now, I've got to evaluate that. I've got to find the value of it, which should be pretty simple to do because there's only one operation required here. When I add 5 plus 8, I get 13. So 13 is my answer. So when we're asked to evaluate an algebraic expression, it really is as simple as subbing these numbers that they give me for the variables and then just working the problem out to get an answer. Now, we're starting out here kind of simple, and we'll work our way up to problems that maybe we have to think a little harder about. All right, here's the second one we're going to look at. We're going to evaluate 3x minus 2 if we know that x is equal to 4. Now, I think we need to take just a minute here to talk about 3x. Okay, I know that I'm going to be subbing a 4 where that x is. So right here where that x is, I want to sub in a number 4. Now, you know, if I picture putting that 4 right there, that's going to make this look like 34. But you all remember that is not what that means. Okay, so let me come up here. When we see 3x, I want you to think about what that really means. Okay, 3x means 3 times x. So when I see that 3 sitting right there next to that x, I know that that means that I am multiplying 3 times x. And you all will probably recall that you can use a dot to show that. So 3x is equal to that. And you may also remember that you can use parentheses to show that you're multiplying. Now I will tell you out of these two that this one is the one I prefer, the parentheses. So that's the one I'm going to ask you to use today. All right, so when I see 3x, I need to remember that means 3 times x. So I'm going to multiply 3 times whatever number I'm subbing in for that x. So here's what I'm going to do. When I sub in the number for that 4, or sub in the 4 for that x, I'm going to put 3 parentheses 4 so that I can see that that's multiplication. And then I've got my minus 2. Okay, now to work this out, to evaluate it, I need to remember GEMDOS. Okay, so does this problem have grouping symbols? Does this problem have grouping symbols? It does have this set of parentheses, but there's nothing to do inside of them. There's just a 4 in there. So grouping symbols are done. I don't need to worry about that. Okay, does this expression have exponents? When I look at 3 times 4 minus 2, I don't see any exponents. Does this problem have multiplying or dividing? When I look at it, I see 3 times 4 minus 2. So yes, I have multiplication. So I'm going to do 3 times 4, which is 12. And then 12 minus 2. So now I can check off multiplying and dividing because that's done. And now I'm going to finish this off with, do I see adding or subtracting? I see 12 minus 2, so I have subtraction. And when I do that, I get 10 as the answer. So I wanted to show you this example because I want to remind you that when we see things like 3x, we got to think about what that means. That means 3 times x. So when you plug that 4 in, you've got to do 3 times 4. And I want you to show that by using parentheses. All right. Example 3. Evaluate xy minus 4 if x is equal to 2 and y is equal to 8. So we are going to sub in a 2 where we see this x, and we're going to sub in an 8 where we see this y. Now again, we want to be careful here because if we do nothing, if we just sub those two numbers in, then that looks like 28 minus 4. But again, here, this is where we got to think. xy, we know means x times y. When those variables are beside each other, that means they're being multiplied. So we could do x with a dot and the y, or we could do x with parentheses and a y. And again, that parentheses version is the one that I want you to use. I want you to use parentheses to show that multiplication. So when I come over here and I see xy, that means I'm going to multiply 2 times 8. So I'm going to write 2 parentheses 8. So that's how I'm going to show 2 times 8, minus 4. And then to work this out, to evaluate him, we do GEMDOS. So does this have our grouping symbols? And the answer is no. It has parentheses, but there's nothing to do inside. So no grouping symbols. Does this expression have exponents? No, it has 2 times 8 minus 4, no exponent. Does it have multiplying or dividing? Yes, it has 2 times 8. So I'll do 2 times 8 and get 16 minus 4. No more multiplying or dividing there. And then add or subtract. 16 minus 4 is 12. So 12 is my answer for that problem. So when you need to show multiplications, I want you to use parentheses to do so. All right, so on this next one, we're going to evaluate x squared plus 3 if we know that x is equal to a negative 3. So we are going to take this negative 3 And we're going to sub that right there for that x. Now, this is really important, okay? When you sub in -3 for this x, and it's being raised to that exponent like that, you need to wrap that -3 up inside parentheses. When you're raising a negative number to an exponent, it needs to be wrapped in parentheses. Now I've got my +3. Now, if you're going to go to your calculator and type in -3 squared, you need to type it in using those parentheses. If you don't use your parentheses on the calculator, you will get the wrong answer. Now, to work this out, we're going to use GEMDOS. So does this have grouping symbols? Well, it has a set of parentheses, but inside there's just a number. There's nothing to do. So no grouping symbols. Does it have an exponent? And the answer is yes. I have to do -3 squared. So I need you all to remember that when we see -3 squared, that means we're going to do -3 times -3. And -3 times -3 is a +9. So when we do -3 squared, we should get a +9 plus 3. Now when I look at 9 plus 3, no more exponent, so I can mark that off. Does this problem have multiplying or dividing? No. Does it have adding or subtracting? Yes. So I do 9 plus 3, and 12 is my answer. So make sure when you're subbing these numbers in that if it's involved in multiplying, that you put parentheses to show that multiplication, and make sure if your number is being raised to a power, like it is here, that you also put that number in parentheses. So here's what we have. We need to kind of summarize what we've done in these examples. To evaluate an algebraic expression, step 1 is to substitute the numbers for the variables. So that is step 1, to substitute the numbers for the variables.